message. But I've titled my message today, Egg Hunt. Egg Hunt. Now, a couple things may arise in your mind as you do that. You may think, well, that's a lazy sermon title. Like, I could have thought of that. Or you could be thinking, doesn't he realize how expensive eggs are? That's a sensitive subject, you know? How could you call it that? Well, we all probably have our guilty YouTube pleasures. Do you have a guilty YouTube pleasure? Maybe your guilty YouTube pleasure is just watching rollerbladers slam. You know, the guy going in the rollerblades or taking his lime scooter like into the pond. Maybe your guilty YouTube pleasure is watching other people's skincare routines. You're like, I don't know, I can't stop watching it. I love to watch the washing, the exfoliating. It gets me every time. You know, maybe for you it's conspiracy theories. You know, well, I'm going to tell you my guilty YouTube pleasure. If I watch a movie, I love film, I love movies, and if I watch a movie that I really enjoy, I get home from the theater and I immediately get on YouTube, and I love to watch those little explainer videos because it's a way to kind of keep the entertainment going for like another extra hour. You know, I just go down I watch these videos. I don't know if you've seen these videos, but it'll be like Dune 2 explained or 200 Easter eggs in Deadpool or whatever it is. And there are some amazing Easter eggs that get put into movies. Some of the most legendary Easter eggs of all time. There's one in Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's actually a hieroglyphic of C-3PO and R2-D2. Nice little Easter egg for the Lucas fans out there. There is in Toy Story, the original Toy Story, when they go to Sid's house, you know, Sid is that neighbor bully, they did an homage to The Shining. They took the carpet pattern from The Shining and they stuck it in Sid's house from Toy Story. Easter eggs. One amazing film, you know, pretty intense film, is the movie The Departed. And Martin Scorsese, he very, very subtly places X anytime a character is going to die, anytime a character is going to be murdered, which itself is kind of an Easter egg calling back to the oranges from The Godfather. So these are Easter eggs. And you go, well, why are you bringing this up, Jesse? Well, it's kind of a big deal right now because these callbacks harnessing this self-referential thing has become so common in movies, it's kind of just become like the thing to do because if you execute it well, it can lead to a huge box office cash grab. And the one that's doing it right now isn't just making money, it's also getting police called to movie theaters, and this is the Minecraft movie. The Minecraft movie, police are being called for these teenage boys who get so excited, and there is no way that your pastor, Jesse Lusko, would ever dump a bucket of popcorn on his family because of a Jack Black children's film about video games. I would never do that. I would never make that happen. Yeah, don't worry, I cleaned up after myself, you know, but I definitely did. Chicken jockey, I definitely did that. And but the reason why I bring this up is because in Luke 24, the passage preceding the one Sally read to us and then on into the one that Sally is reading, Jesus has just rolled up on two guys who are walking away from Jerusalem completely dejected. They are utterly hopeless. They thought Jesus was going to set them free from the Romans. They thought that Jesus was the Messiah, but here he dies tortured to death, brutally humiliated. All of their hopes are dashed. They are crushed. And the sun is setting, if you can picture it. They don't have any street lights. It's dim. It's dark. And as they're walking towards Emmaus, Jesus, the risen Christ, appears to them. And it says that he opened to them the scriptures and showed them the things pertaining to himself. Submit to you today that Jesus took them on an Easter egg hunt. He took them on an Easter egg hunt all throughout the Old Testament, showing that, hey, the cross wasn't an accident. The cross wasn't a mistake. God did 8-ball corner pocket. He called his shot far in advance. And they say as they're walking along the road to Emmaus, did our hearts not burn within us as he walked with us on the way? That as he showed them the Hebrew scriptures, that all of it was telegraphed, all of it was planned in advance. As he unrolled each Easter egg, their minds were just blown. It was like Jesus was taking a Wu-Tang song and adding like a fresh hook to it, and then being like, by the way, I also gave them the original beat. And they're like, their minds are just blown. They can't even process that. They can't even compute. They can't handle it because it is so stunning. Now we get to this section immediately after it. They hightail it back to Jerusalem to the other disciples who are terrified of the religious leaders murdering them. So they're hiding in an upper room. And these two guys come back and they say, hey, the women were right. And we're going to get more to that later. The women saw Jesus first. But he says, the women were right. We just saw him on the road. Our hearts burned within us. They're blown away. And then, boom, they're in their midst. As one commentator put it, Jesus' body now passes beyond space and time because he's the Lord of reality, the Lord of heaven and earth. He appears in their midst as they're talking. And that brings us to verse 44. Or excuse me, verse 38. And the first thought I want to bring to your attention is look at the details. Look at the details. It says, why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. Now, many people would hear a passage like this, and they'd go, that's nice. You're getting together singing. Your gospel music, your choir was lovely. But, Jesus, that's just like Santa Claus. That's just like the Easter Bunny. It's just like Bigfoot. People claim to have seen him. Some weirdos believe in him. Maybe he's pretty popular here in Oregon. I better be careful. But Jesus is just like the Tooth Fairy. It's like Bigfoot. It's just a myth. But I would like to bring to your attention something you might not be aware of, and that's that it's not just the Gospels that talk about Jesus. Secular Roman and Jewish historians talk about the historical Jesus. There's Josephus, there's Lucian, there's Pliny the Younger, there's the Talmud, there's Marbar Serapion, there's Thallus. Secular historians corroborate that a man named Jesus really was crucified under the Roman prefect Pontius Pilate. If you say, oh, I don't believe in Jesus, he never even existed, that's just a fairy tale, that Jesus stuff, well, then you need to reject virtually every fact of ancient history. Because Jesus is more well corroborated than most of the things that we take for granted. It's a fact. It is a certainty that there was someone named Jesus of Nazareth crucified under Pontius Pilate. Now, he addresses doubt. And when you first read this, you might go, oh, Jesus doesn't like their doubts. That's what I don't like about Christianity. It's blind faith. Well, I want you to look at this passage a little bit differently. Because does Jesus go, you doubters, you're out of the 12 apostles. Get out of here. I need to find me some disciples who really believe. I need to find me some true believers. Is that what he does? No. When the doubts arise in their mind, he offers them the precise evidence that they're looking for. He says, touch me. He says, here, give me some fish. Can a ghost eat fish? It's just like such a random detail. Just gets thrown in there. He offers them exactly the evidence that they need. One of our slogans here at Counterculture is skeptics welcome. There's a French proverb that says, he who doubts nothing thinks nothing. Do you realize that doubt can be the doorway to a deeper faith? You will never find answers until you start asking questions. Everything that I share up here on stage week after week here at Counterculture, and we want to invite you back next week, by the way, we're kicking off a new series. But everything I share up here on stage is really the fruit of my own periods of questioning, my own doubt. Everything that I'm constantly presenting is something, doubt can be a good thing. If you follow your doubts through, you can find really compelling answers. Now, I want you to look at the details. He asked them to look at his hands and his feet. And if you doubt the Gospels, you say, I don't believe the Gospels. Well, I point you to a man named Richard Bauckham from Cambridge University. He wrote a book called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, which is such a persuasive scholarly volume that it's actually pretty much repelled the idea that the Gospels can't be trusted, which was popular back in the for the century prior to that. I point you to Richard Bauckham from Cambridge University. But let's say we even are the most skeptical people possible, and we say, the Gospels were written way later. We don't believe that. Well, hey, I want to show you something called the minimal facts approach. The minimal facts approach. And what the minimal facts approach is it's taking the simple facts that virtually all ancient historians agree upon. Okay, all first century historians. And the minimal fact says, even if we throw out, we don't know if Jesus really said this, we don't know if he really said that, maybe they made that up later. Here are the facts that all reputable scholars agree upon. It's that Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate, that the tomb was empty, that the first witnesses of the tomb were women, that the apostles really believed that they encountered Jesus and saw him, and that they were martyred for it. Okay, those are the minimal facts. I'll go through them one more time for you. Jesus was real, and he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. We have archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilate, by the way. That the tomb really was empty, because if the tomb wasn't empty, the religious leaders would have just pulled the body out and be like, you idiots, and the thing would never have taken off. Next thing is that the first eyewitnesses of the tomb were women. The next thing is that the apostles really believed they saw something, and that they devoted their life to it and then died for it and were brutally murdered by the Jews and by the Romans. So that's the minimal facts approach. Now, when somebody makes a claim as ridiculous and crazy as, hey, a guy in the middle of history rose from the dead and is the savior of mankind, well, there's a claim, but then you have to look at the data and you have to find an explanation that holds explanatory power. What explanation has the most explanatory power? And when you take time to look at those details of the minimal facts approach, it is very difficult to come up with an explanation that accounts for all of those details apart from the resurrection of Jesus. It's very, very difficult to think, how did all this happen? How did it take place? I'll just zero in on the thing about women. Now, all four Gospels say that the first witnesses of Jesus' resurrection were women. And we go, well, that's cool. How progressive, how modern of them. Well, it's not just that. They would virtually have no benefit in saying this. Because check out this quote by Flavius Josephus. Flavius Josephus says, from women, this is just a historian, he's not talking about Jesus, he's just talking about the culture. From women, let no evidence be accepted because of the levity and brashness of their sex. That's how the ancient world felt about it. That's how the Romans and the Jews, they said, you can't listen to women. They're silly. They're foolish. They're given to frivolity. And the disciples don't show up as like, the disciples were kind. They were the knights in shining armor. And so they wrote this propaganda to get women on their side. No, all the disciples are mean to the women. This is horrible propaganda. It's awful. So what do historians say? Well, the only reason why they'd make women the first witnesses of the tomb in all four Gospels is because they actually were. There's no other way to explain it. There's no advantage. There's no power play. There's no propaganda. It's like, this is just what happened. But by the way, Jesus always elevated women. Jesus always exalted women. And as the resurrection spread on, the status of women was raised because they were trampled on horribly in ancient Rome. And Jesus elevates women. And I just want to say this, any church that doesn't honor women and elevate women and love women is contrary to the Spirit of Jesus. Yeah. Any leader, anybody at all. So look at the details. Next thing is zoom out to the big story. Zoom out to the big story. Verse 44. This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, the Psalms, that's the whole Old Testament. Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. He told them, this is what is written. The Messiah will suffer and will rise from the dead on the third day. Now, keeping with our theme of Easter eggs from these YouTube videos, there are some people who don't like the whole self-referential, all of these jokes, everything, like, the actors are always winking at you. Some cinephiles really hate that. Like, they think that's actually a really bad thing that's happening in movies. But there's a way to do it well, and there's a way to do it poorly. Martin Scorsese, for example. He does his Easter eggs in such a way that it adds to the story. It doesn't distract from it. And any filmmaking is really about storytelling. And so what I want to invite you to do is to zoom out to the big story. And that's what Jesus is doing here. He's telling them, hey, I am not just some afterthought. The cross wasn't just like some little add-on there at the end. No, this was always what the Bible was about. The Hebrew Bible, all the way to the beginning, the Bible says Jesus was the lamb slain before the foundations of the world. He is the A to Z. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the big story. Now, you may be here this morning and you go, well, I don't know if I believe that story. I got invited by a friend. I'm considering it. I'll check it out. Maybe you're a spiritually curious person, spiritual, not religious, or maybe you consider yourself a full-blown skeptic. But I would like to say that the story of Jesus makes better sense of your life than any other story. Because yesterday, I saw a big protest go through downtown Portland. A little bit earlier, there's the Hands Off March, which had 10,000 people in it. And I always love to pay attention to the signs. I love to read them. People put care and time and thought into those signs. But something you'll often see at any protest here in Portland is you'll see signs that say things like, human rights are non-negotiable. You'll see things like, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. I saw one yesterday that said, make lying wrong again. Make lying wrong again. So here we are in a city, we believe in justice, we believe in human rights. We would say that lying has been detrimental to our civic institutions. Well, there's an alternate, so we believe all of those things, but the story that's offered to us most commonly is summed up nicely by the filmmaker, the storyteller, Woody Allen. Let me read you this Woody Allen quote. This is the alternate story. You reject the story of Jesus, you're a secular person, you can adopt Woody Allen's story. It's just an accident that we happen to be on earth, enjoying our silly little moments, distracting ourselves as often as possible so we don't really have to face up to the fact that, we're just temporary people with a very short time in a universe that will eventually be completely gone. And everything that you value, whether it's Shakespeare or Beethoven, Da Vinci or whatever, it will be gone. The earth will be gone. The sun will be gone. There'll be nothing. The best you can get through life is with distraction. Love is a distraction. Work is a distraction. There are billions of distractions. But the key is to distract yourself. So, one day everyone you know is going to die, and everyone they know is going to die, and one day the human race is going to go extinct. One day the solar system is going to burn up, and there will be no one to miss you when you are gone. And it won't matter if you were a humanitarian or a totalitarian. It's all the same in the end. You can distract yourself with an Ivy League degree, or you can distract yourself with an IV full of fentanyl. You can distract yourself by saving the oceans, or you can distract yourself by drinking down an ocean. You can distract yourself by invading a neighboring nation that has a smaller economy. You can distract yourself by putting cuts on your body. Woody Allen chose to distract himself sometimes with some underage things. So, why do we hate that so much? Why do we hate that, a tech billionaire can do whatever he wants? Why do we viscerally feel so bad? Is our desire for justice just a joke? Is our conviction that life matters and that human beings have unalienable rights, is that just a gag? Jesus says no. And the resurrection of Jesus, it makes more sense of some of your deepest values and longings. And what's the story of the Bible? Because a lot of us, we have all these random facts from the Bible, right? I've got this story about Moses. This story about Esther, we've got some good morals. We've got some little catchy phrases that athletes put on their shoes. Maybe we've got some weird parts that we don't like and we don't understand. And it's all flying around. But what made these disciples' hearts burn with them was Jesus gave them the big picture of the Scripture, the whole story. And that's this: creation. God is an artist, and He loves to share. And He created humanity not to be slaves, but to be His partners, because He loved to share. But humanity fell. Creation, fall. Humanity fell. We rejected the partnership. We said, God, we don't want anything to do with you. We're going to do it our way. And it led to division and alienation and broken relationships and heartache and broken families and sorrow and war and strife and racism and genocide. But God promised redemption. Creation, fall, redemption. He chose a people, the people of the Jews, to be the ones to show His ways. But they continued to rebel. They continued to fall. So over and over again, He dropped breadcrumbs. He dropped Easter eggs that one day there would be a Messiah who would come, who would restore the partnership. And so Jesus comes. And He comes humble, not like some proud, arrogant politician. Jesus comes as a peasant. He comes born into poverty, born a minority, born under tyranny. And He comes and He loves the lowly. He loves the weak. He loves the poor. He loves the broken. And then the powers that be, they crucify Him. They nail Him to a cross. But the injustice that took Him out was the injustice that's inside all of us. Because we're all prone to greed. We're all prone to self-indulgence. We're all prone to using people instead of loving people. And so Jesus, He's crucified for us, but He doesn't stay dead. He rises the third day as a glimmer of what God's finally going to bring: creation, fall, redemption, restoration, and that we're not going to be floaty ghosts up in heaven strumming harps. That's not what the Bible ends like. The Bible ends with eating fish, touching a body. It's a resurrection, that God's going to restore His creation and make the work of art what it was always meant to be. That's the story. That's the story that you are invited into. And I bet your heart aches for that story. Because even if you feel like, I just can't believe it, I just can't do it, there's part of you that longs for it. Because Easter is about mortality, isn't it? It's about death. And people say, death is just a part of life. It's just all natural. I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a single second. Think about the person you love most in the world. Think about that person you love so much. Is there ever going to be a time where you're going to go, all right, that's enough. I hope I never see you again? Everyone wants love to last forever. And Easter says it will. And you can turn to Jesus today. You're going to have an opportunity and invitation today to put your trust in the risen Christ. You have to step over the line at some point, and today's as good a day as any. Our final thought this morning is to join the global movement. Join the global movement. I always like to kind of recap the points. So look at the details, zoom out to the big story, and then finally join the global movement. Isn't it funny when a movie really takes off, like Top Gun Maverick or Avatar or something? I love the marketing. It goes like this. See what people around the globe are talking about. Join the global movement. You're the phenomena. So great. Well, Jesus is kind of a phenomenon. Like, you should maybe, buy a ticket for what audiences around the globe are raving about. And you go, well, no, isn't Christianity fading from the world? Aren't we just getting more scientific and more secular? Well, not exactly. Because some interesting research dropped just in time for Easter. Barna Research Group found that in 2021, faith in Jesus had dropped to the lowest it had ever dropped. It's like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris were right, 2021. Faith in Jesus had dropped to an all-time low in the United States. Well, I know what happened in the past 4 years. 30 million Americans came to faith in Jesus. And that stat has jumped up by 30 million people. You know, sorry to be a little on the nose, but he is the comeback king after all. He's the comeback king. 30 million people. That research just dropped from Barna Research. And you may have a certain picture in your mind. Well, you know, I picture a white Republican when I picture a Christian. That's probably what's wrong with this country. Well, check out what Stephen Carter says. Stephen Carter says, a difficulty endemic to today's secular left. By the way, he's a black legal scholar from Yale University. Is a weird refusal to acknowledge the demographics of Christianity. In the U.S., black women are by far the most Christian demographic. And around the globe, the people most likely to be Christians are women of color. When you mock Christians, you're not mocking who you think you are. What really astonishes me is my favorite Easter egg. My favorite Easter egg comes from a book of the Bible. You know, conservative scholars would say it was written 1,000 years before Jesus. It's Psalm 22. Psalm 22. But let's take the most skeptical road. We can say with certainty, because of the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, that it was written easily 100 years before Jesus, but likely way, way more. I'm going to read you the little Easter egg from Psalm 22. Jesus quotes this psalm on the cross. He says, dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. But here's the kicker. Here's where Stephen Carter comes in. Is that Psalm 22, it's talking about this, it's predicting that there's going to be this guy tortured to death, this guy forsaken by God, who's going to have his hands and his feet pierced, predicting that that's going to happen. It's kind of a weird prediction, right? Well, what gets even weirder is the way it ends. Psalm 22 says, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. Future generations, that's you and me, baby, will be told about the Lord, and they will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet born that he has done it. Amazing. Yeah, we're getting more claps than usual. It's not always this clappy. More claps than typical on Easter. That's just how it goes. But this is stunning, and this is particularly meaningful for me to be on this stage speaking to you because we're about a year and a half old. We had Easter last year, but last year was a little different. Easter is about Jesus conquering the grave, and then that message going around the world, which it has. And just think about how bizarre that is. That a tortured to death peasant would become the most famous person in human history. Just think about it. Like, just why is that? That is so weird. Why did 30 million Americans give up on the nihilism and the emptiness, and 30 million Americans become obsessed with this crucified guy in the last 4 years? Like, why do people around the globe, 3 billion people, why do they care about this crucified peasant? And apparently, a Jewish poet predicted that was going to happen. So wild. But this is meaningful to me because in the darkest seasons of my life, when I'm just feeling so frustrated and so discouraged and depressed, because I'm just as human as you, something I just tell myself, I'll just pray. I'll go, I believe in the God of Psalm 22. I believe in the God of Psalm 22. Well, last Easter was one of those moments. Because my dad, who was my best friend, who was the stable one in my life, he got pancreatic cancer, and I watched him die on Easter. I had to preach to the church via camera from Albuquerque, and my dad said his last words ever on Holy Saturday. He lost the ability to speak. It was gruesome. It was traumatic. It was horrifying. We had thousands of people praying for his cancer, thousands of people, and The answer was no. And then I watched my dad die one day after Easter. Jesus is back from the grave, but where's my miracle? But here's the deal. The God of Psalm 22 was with me in Albuquerque. Because what is Psalm 22? It's that God can take horrendous suffering and bring good. And there around my dad's bed, as he was exiting this life, I was there with all my siblings. You know, we have our issues, we got friction, but all of us were united. None of us were estranged. We took communion at his bedside. We sang to Jesus in my dad's last hours together. How were we able to worship on that day? How were we able to worship when our prayer wasn't being answered? How were we able to worship in that moment of darkness? Well, because my dad had shown us to worship every day. There's a dark day coming for you. There's a dark day inbound. It might be in your inbox waiting for you right now, Monday morning. But if you want something that will carry you through life's darkest times, you need to put your trust in Jesus. He will sustain you with a God who takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it around for good. A God who can take the darkness and bring forth light. But I want to just end with and you're going to have an opportunity to put your trust in Jesus in just a moment. But I want to end with one last little thought, and that's what it says in verse 53. And they stayed continually at the temple praising God. In this passage, it says that Jesus says, peace to you, and it says they were filled with joy and amazement. So let's say this, I'm going to say this for you, is that peace, joy, amazement. Peace, joy, amazement. I was talking to a guy in the street corner just yesterday, and he goes, I'm so scared. I'm headed to the protest because I feel so scared. You know what Jesus offers you this morning? He offers you peace, joy, and amazement. But if you want Jesus in your life and you want peace, you cannot treat God like you treat, the guy who changes your oil. That you just go see him every 6 months on Christmas and Easter. You cannot treat Jesus like the dentist, or like just a restaurant that you go to on nice occasions. Like, I'm happy to have people come once a year on Easter, once a year on Christmas, but you're not going to experience peace, joy, and amazement if you leave Jesus like a little supplement on your life that maybe you remember to take him. He wants to be your main course. He wants to be the very center of your life. And if you give him the center of your life, he will fill you with peace. He will fill you with joy. He'll fill you with everything. Jesus, he is the better Adam who passed the test in the garden. Jesus is the better Moses who sets us free and leads us into the promised lands of God's presence. Jesus, he's the better David who doesn't just risk his life to slay Goliath. He gave his life to save us from our giants. Jesus, he's the spotless lamb who was the sacrifice to end all sacrifice. Jesus, he is the true and better temple where heaven touches earth. Jesus, on the cross, he became the tree of life to become the food that nourishes us. Jesus, he is the water of life. And you might be searching like an Easter egg hunt. You're searching in bars. You're searching on Hinge. You're searching on dating apps. You're searching in the stock market. You're searching in money, and you're thirsty. You're dying of thirst. But Jesus, he said, if anyone comes to me, I will out of his innermost being will go rivers of living water, and he will never thirst again.
Woo, yeah.
Easter isn't just a story in the Bible. Easter's the point of the whole Bible. And if you take your story and make it about his story, he's offering you peace, joy,